my wife ended our 14-year marriage with a 6-line email sent at 9:12 on a Monday morning. The subject was next steps. She wrote that she had retained an attorney, that she wanted a divorce, and that all communication should go through counsel. She added that she would be staying elsewhere for the foreseeable future and asked me not to contact her family. At the bottom, below her name, she had pasted her lawyer's information. No phone call, no conversation, no warning that morning when she kissed my cheek and asked whether I could pick up dishwasher tablets on the way home. I read the email twice from the cab of my work truck, then replied with one word. Understood. By lunch, I had moved my paycheck, frozen our joint credit line, removed her from my company fuel account, and canceled the monthly transfer I had been sending to her personal checking account for 9 years. At 3:40 that afternoon, her attorney called me sounding angry. By 4, he sounded nervous. That was when I realized my wife hadn't planned a divorce. She had planned an ambush. She just hadn't planned for me to believe her. My name is Owen Parker. I was 41 when this happened, and I owned a small commercial refrigeration company outside Tulsa. I started the business in my late 20s with one service van, a rented storage unit, and enough debt to make sleep optional. For the first 3 years, I handled everything myself. Calls at 2 in the morning because a restaurant freezer stopped working. Emergency repairs at grocery stores on holidays. Long drives across Oklahoma because a customer couldn't find anyone else willing to come out. My wife Elise was there during those early years, at least physically. She worked part-time for an event planning company and handled some invoicing when the business was small. She chose the logo, answered phones occasionally, and helped me paint the first office. I never pretended she contributed nothing, but once the company started making real money, she stopped helping and started referring to it as our business. That bothered me, though I rarely said so. I had 6 employees by the time Elise sent that email. 2 technicians, 3 apprentices, 1 office manager. We service restaurants, schools, and several convenience store chains. The business wasn't huge, but it was stable. More importantly, I had built it before the marriage. My father's divorce had taught me to keep records. The company was held in an LLC, created 18 months before Elise and I got married. Business accounts were separate. Equipment purchases were documented. Any money I transferred into our household account was logged as owner compensation. Elise used to tease me about that. You treat marriage like an audit. I usually laughed. Turns out audits are useful when someone decides love was only temporary, but entitlement should be permanent. The email wasn't completely out of nowhere. Nothing like that ever is. The signs had started about a year earlier. Elise began spending more time with her cousin, Mallory. Mallory had gone through a bitter divorce and came out of it convinced every marriage was a negotiation one person was secretly losing. At first, their time together seemed harmless. Brunch, shopping, weekend spa trips. Then Elise started coming home with new language. She said our household finances lacked equity. She said the fact that I paid the major bills gave me structural control. She asked why she had to tell me before transferring large amounts of money. I reminded her that I told her before I moved money too. That wasn't the answer she wanted. One Sunday evening, about 3 weeks before the email, she brought up selling part of the company. We were eating dinner at the kitchen island. You work too much, she said. That isn't new. You could sell a share and slow down. To who? There are investment groups. I looked at her. Where did that come from? She shrugged. Mallory knows someone. That sentence should have stayed with me. At the time, I thought it was another one of Mallory's theories. I told Elise I had no interest in selling. She became quiet. 2 days later, she asked whether my operating agreement allowed a spouse to claim ownership during divorce. Not exactly romantic dinner conversation. I stared at her across the table. Why are you asking? I'm curious. You've never been curious about an operating agreement in 14 years. She smiled too quickly. Maybe I'm trying to understand your world. I didn't believe her. I also didn't confront her. That was my mistake. I assumed whatever was happening would eventually become a conversation. Elise had already moved past conversation. The weekend before the email, we had our first serious fight in years. I noticed $8,000 missing from our joint savings account. The account was supposed to cover property taxes, insurance, and home repairs. I asked where the money went. Elise was sitting on the couch scrolling through her phone. She barely looked up. I moved it. To where? My account. Why? Because it's joint money. That doesn't answer the question. Her expression changed. You always interrogate me about money. I asked about $8,000. Exactly. I almost laughed. What amount would I be allowed to ask about? She stood. This is what Mallory was talking about. I leaned against the kitchen counter. What exactly has Mallory been talking about? That you use money to control me. I looked around our house. Elise drove a new Lexus. She had 2 credit cards attached to my account. I paid the mortgage, utilities, insurance, vacations, and almost every household expense. She earned around $26,000 a year from freelance event planning and kept most of it in her own checking account. If that was control, I was doing a poor job of it. Elise, where did the money go? I told you. No. You told me where you moved it. She folded her arms. I need something that's mine. You already have an account that's yours. That's income. What do you need $8,000 for? Her eyes shifted away. Just for a second. That was the first moment I knew the answer mattered. She said it was for legal advice. Not divorce, she insisted. Just advice. Mallory had convinced her every married woman should understand her financial position. I asked whether she had already met with an attorney. She said no. That was a lie. The email arrived 2 days later. After I read it, I called my accountant first, then my bank, then a lawyer named Denise Caldwell, who had handled a contract dispute for one of my clients. Denise called me back within 20 minutes. Do not text your wife anything emotional, she said. I wrote understood. Perfect. She said lawyers only. Then give her exactly that. I explained our finances. Separate business accounts, joint household savings, her authorized cards, the monthly transfer, the Lexus lease in my name. Denise stopped me. How much do you send her monthly? $3,000. In addition to paying everything? Yes. Is that required by any written agreement? No. Stop it. I hesitated. She'll say I cut her off. She declared the marriage over and demanded formal communication. Informal support ends when formal proceedings begin. That made sense. It still felt harsh. Maybe because I had spent 14 years solving discomfort with money. I logged into the bank and canceled the recurring transfer. Then I removed Elise as an authorized user from 2 cards. I did not cancel the utilities. I did not remove her from health insurance. I did not touch her personal account. I simply stopped giving her access to mine. Next came the company fuel card. Elise had one because she sometimes picked up supplies or drove to client events. I disabled it. Then I changed passwords for the streaming accounts, cloud storage, and home security app. Not to punish her. Because she had told me we were no longer operating as a family. At 2 that afternoon, I received the name of her attorney, Gerald Knox. He worked at a firm known for aggressive divorce cases involving business owners. That confirmed Elise had planned this for a while. People did not accidentally hire Gerald Knox on a Monday morning. At 3:40, my phone rang. Mr. Parker? Yes. This is Gerald Knox. I represent your wife. I received her email. My client has informed me that her access to several financial resources was terminated today. That's correct. His tone sharpened. You cannot financially punish a spouse for initiating divorce. I didn't. You canceled her cards. She was an authorized user, not an account holder. You stopped a regular transfer. It was voluntary. You disabled her fuel card. That belongs to my company. There was a pause. I could hear papers moving. Mr. Parker, financial conditions are expected to remain stable during separation. Then your client should not have moved $8,000 from our joint account before filing. Silence. A longer one this time. She did not disclose that to you? No. And she told me all communication should go through you. Yes. So I followed her instructions. He lowered his voice. My client requires funds for housing and daily expenses. Where is she staying? That is private. Then her expenses can be documented through formal disclosure. Another pause. I could almost hear him recalculating. You have retained counsel? Yes. Who? Denise Caldwell. That changed the call. Not dramatically, but enough. Gerald Knox knew the name. Most attorneys in Tulsa did. Have Miss Caldwell contact me. She will. I started to end the call. Then he said, Mr. Parker, I strongly advise you not to take further unilateral action. I looked through the glass wall of my office at the shop floor. 3 technicians were loading tools into vans. Employees whose paychecks depended on me making careful decisions. I could give your client the same advice. Then I hung up. Denise called 15 minutes later. You need to come to my office tomorrow morning. What happened? Knox sent over their preliminary demands. That was fast. That's because they were written before she emailed you. I sat down. What does she want? Denise went quiet for a moment. Then she said, temporary support, exclusive use of the house, her vehicle paid in full, half the business income, and immediate access to company records. I looked toward the framed photograph on my desk. Elise and me on our 10th anniversary. Both smiling. Neither looking like we were preparing for war. Anything else? Yes. Denise's voice hardened. She claims she helped to build the company and intends to seek an ownership interest. I stared at the shop floor again. Then my computer chimed. An alert from our business banking system. Someone had attempted to log in using an old administrative password. The location was traced to our home address. Elise hadn't just hired a lawyer. She had tried to enter my company accounts hours after demanding that I never contact her again. I took a screenshot of the login alert before doing anything else. Then I called my office manager, Tessa. Are you still at the shop? Yeah, why? Go into the server room and unplug the old office computer. There was a pause. The gray one? Yes. That thing barely turns on. Apparently someone thinks it's still useful. I told her not to log into anything and not to touch the keyboard. Just disconnect the network cable and wait for me. Then I called Denise. She answered on the first ring. Tell me you didn't confront her. I didn't. Good. What happened? I explained the attempted login. The business portal showed the home IP address, the time, and the username Elise had used years earlier when she occasionally handled invoices. Denise became quiet. That's useful. Useful? For us. For the police, maybe. Not yet. I frowned. She tried to access company accounts. She may claim she was checking records she believes she had a right to see. She doesn't. I know that. A judge needs the clean version. What's the clean version? Preserve the evidence. Change every credential. Get an outside IT report. Then we decide whether to report unauthorized access. I looked through the office window. Tessa was standing beside the old computer, arms folded. Why wait? Because the moment this becomes criminal, Knox will say, "You're weaponizing law enforcement during a divorce." So I'm supposed to ignore it? No. Denise's voice sharpened. You're supposed to handle it better than they expect. That sentence became the theme of the next 7 months. I drove to the shop and met a local cybersecurity technician named Miles Hargrove. He ran diagnostics, documented the login attempt, and confirmed someone had used a saved browser credential from my home network. The password failed because I'd changed it that afternoon. If I hadn't, Elise would have entered the operating account, payroll files, client contracts, and employee tax records. Miles printed a report and signed it. What do you want me to do with the computer? Tessa asked. Lock it in storage. She looked at me for a moment. Is everything okay? No. Business okay? Yes. That was the question she actually cared about. Tessa had worked for me 6 years. She had 2 kids and a mortgage. The technicians had families too. Elise could call the company marital property all she wanted. To me, it was 6 people depending on payroll every other Friday. I wasn't going to let a divorce turn their jobs into leverage. The next morning, I met Denise at her office. She had already reviewed the preliminary demands. The document was 32 pages long. Elise claimed she had been financially dependent on me throughout the marriage, which was partly true. She also claimed she had sacrificed her career to build my company, which was generous. She had answered phones occasionally during the first year and helped choose the company colors. According to the filing, that made her a co-founder. Can she actually get half? I asked. Denise tapped the operating agreement. She can seek a share of the increase in value during the marriage. That's not the same as ownership. No, but it can still be expensive. How expensive? She looked at me over her glasses. Enough that you need to stop thinking emotionally and start thinking like the person who built a company from nothing. I nodded. She pushed another page toward me. Temporary support request. $9,000 per month. Household expenses maintained separately. Lexus lease continued. Legal fees paid by me. Access to company distributions. And exclusive use of the house. She left the house, I said. I noticed. She wants me to pay for it while she lives somewhere else? She intends to return once she gets the order. Where am I supposed to go? They suggest temporary housing near your business. I laughed. Denise didn't. They expect you to keep paying until you're too tired to fight. Who's they? Elise, Knox, possibly Mallory. I thought about the investment group Mallory supposedly knew. Can we subpoena communication between them? Eventually. I want eventually to happen faster. It will. Denise opened a new folder. First, we answer every demand. For the next 2 hours, we built the response. The business existed before the marriage. My initial equipment was purchased before the wedding. Elise never invested personal funds. She had not participated in operations for more than a decade. She held no ownership units. She had never signed employee documents, vendor contracts, tax filings, or bank resolutions. Her name appeared nowhere except occasional reimbursements from the early years. The more documents Denise reviewed, the less concerned she looked. Then she found the $8,000 transfer. Where did this money go? I don't know. Her account? That's what she said. Denise pulled up the joint statement. It didn't. She turned the laptop toward me. The money left our savings account and went to a newly opened checking account at a credit union in Broken Arrow. The account holder wasn't Elise. It was Mallory Hale. I stared at the screen. She gave it to her cousin. Looks that way. Why? That's what Discovery is for. Denise printed the transfer confirmation. Did Elise mention paying her lawyer? She said the money was for legal advice. Knox's retainer account isn't at this bank. So she lied. She redirected marital money to a third party days before filing. Denise smiled faintly. That's better for us than a normal retainer. By noon, Knox had our formal response. At 12:30, he called Denise. I wasn't in the room, but she summarized the conversation afterward. He called my decision to cancel voluntary support punitive. She called Elise's transfer to Mallory dissipation of marital assets. He threatened an emergency hearing. Denise offered Thursday morning. He apparently expected us to delay. We didn't. The hearing was scheduled for 3 days later. That afternoon, Elise broke her own lawyer's only rule. She texted me from a number I didn't recognize. Owen, this is getting out of control. I can't access anything. Gerald says you're trying to leave me with nothing. I didn't reply. A second message came. I never wanted this to become ugly. Then, please just restore the cards until court. I forwarded all 3 to Denise. She wrote back, do not answer. Save everything. 5 minutes later, Mallory called my office. Tessa transferred the call before she knew who it was. Owen, you need to stop punishing Elise. Why is $8,000 in your bank account? That shut her down. Only for a second. It's being held for her safety. From what? You. I looked around my office. Return it. Talk to her attorney. You aren't her attorney. No, I'm the person who finally helped her see what you've been doing. What have I been doing? Making her dependent. I almost admired how quickly she turned receiving $3,000 a month into victimhood. Mallory, don't call my business again. You're scared because she knows her rights. No. I lowered my voice. I'm concerned because you're holding marital funds while helping her attorney build a claim that she has no money. Silence. Then she said, You always think you're the smartest person in the room. I don't. I looked at the bank record on my desk. I just keep receipts. She hung up. At 4 that afternoon, another alert came through. This time from the county property portal. Someone had ordered a certified copy of the deed to our house. The request had been submitted using Elise's email. That alone wasn't illegal. It was still useful. Then Denise called. I just received something from Knox. What now? A proposed property agreement. We haven't even had the hearing. I know. What does it say? She paused. Elise keeps the house. I looked toward the shop floor again. And I keep the company? That's the offer. That sounds almost reasonable. It would be. Her tone told me it wasn't. What am I missing? They valued your company at $800,000? I laughed. It wasn't worth half that. And the house? $420? That's close. So she keeps a $420,000 house. And I supposedly keep an $800,000 company. Then I owe her the difference. Exactly. How much? Roughly $190,000 after the mortgage adjustment. I sat down slowly. They created the business valuation. Yes. Based on what? A report from a consulting firm. Which firm? Denise read the name. Hale Strategic Valuations. Mallory's last name. I opened the company search on my computer. The firm had been registered 11 days earlier. Its business address matched Mallory's home. They hadn't just prepared divorce demands before Elise emailed me. Mallory had created a company to inflate the value of mine. And according to the registration documents, Elise was listed as its first client. The emergency hearing lasted 43 minutes. Gerald Knox spent the first 15 making me sound like a man who had cut off a helpless wife with no warning. He described Elise as financially vulnerable, dependent, displaced. He said I'd used my superior access to money as a weapon the moment she asked for a divorce. Then Denise stood. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't accuse anyone of conspiracy. She just handed the judge a timeline. Monday, 9:12 a.m. Elise emailed me demanding divorce and lawyers-only communication. Monday, 9:19 a.m. I replied, understood. Monday, 11:46 a.m. I canceled a voluntary monthly transfer and removed her from accounts she didn't own. Monday, 2:03 p.m. Someone at my home attempted to access the company banking portal. 3 days before filing, Elise transferred $8,000 from joint savings into Mallory's account. 11 days before filing, Mallory created a valuation company. The judge read the timeline in silence. Knox tried to interrupt. The judge held up one hand. Mr. Knox, you'll have your opportunity. That was the first sign things weren't going the way they expected. Elise sat beside him, wearing a cream sweater and no makeup. She looked tired, but not devastated. More like someone frustrated that a plan had become complicated. The judge asked why she had left the marital home. Knox answered for her. She feared continued financial control. The judge looked at Elise. I asked your client. Elise cleared her throat. I needed space. Did your husband tell you to leave? No. Did he threaten you? No. Did he restrict your physical access to the home? No. Do you still have a key? Yes. The judge glanced at the request for exclusive use. Then why are you seeking possession of a house you voluntarily left? Elise looked toward Knox. He stepped in. Your Honor, the home represents stability. For whom? The judge's tone stayed calm. Knox stopped. The temporary support request didn't go much better. He asked for $9,000 a month. Denise submitted Elise's income, spending history, and access to the $8,000 held by Mallory. She also showed that I was still paying the mortgage, health insurance, property insurance, and the Lexus lease. The judge adjusted his glasses. Mrs. Parker, do you currently have access to the funds transferred to Ms. Hale? Elise hesitated. Yes. How much remains? I'm not sure. Estimate. About $6,000. That was new. $2,000 had already been spent. On what? The judge asked. Legal consultation and temporary expenses. Knox shifted in his chair. The judge looked at him. Your retainer was not paid from those funds, according to the disclosure. No, Your Honor. So what legal consultation? Elise's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Denise didn't smile. She didn't have to. The judge ordered temporary support at $2,400 a month, not $9,000. He denied exclusive use of the house. He ordered both parties not to access business systems without written authorization. Then he ordered Mallory to return the remaining joint funds within 5 business days. Knox objected. The judge overruled him. By the time we walked out, Elise looked less tired and more angry. Mallory was waiting in the hallway. She marched toward me before Denise could stop her. You're proud of yourself. I kept walking. You embarrassed her in there. No. I glanced at Elise. The documents did. Mallory stepped closer. You think paperwork makes you right? It helps. She pointed at me. This is exactly why she left you. Denise moved between us. Ms. Hale, any future contact with my client should go through counsel. Mallory laughed. You people love hiding behind lawyers. Denise looked at her evenly. You created a valuation company 11 days before your cousin filed for divorce. Mallory's face changed. Not much. Enough. Would you like to discuss that here? She backed away. That was the last thing she said before dragging Elise toward the elevator. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. A text from Elise. Her first direct message since the hearing. Please don't subpoena Victor. You don't understand what that will trigger. I stared at the screen. Then another message arrived. Mallory said this was supposed to stay civil. And finally, if Victor gets involved, we could both lose everything. I read Elise's 3 text messages twice. Then I handed my phone to Denise. She didn't react until she reached the last one. If Victor gets involved, we could both lose everything. Denise looked up. Interesting. That's one word for it. She isn't worried about the divorce anymore. What is she worried about? Discovery. She slid the phone back across the desk. People don't ask you not to subpoena someone unless they're afraid of what that person might say under oath. I looked at Victor Sloan's profile again. Corporate restructuring, ownership transitions, private acquisitions. None of those job titles sounded illegal, but they didn't have to be. Sometimes the legal way to take a business was simply making the owner too exhausted to keep it. So we subpoena him? Denise smiled. We absolutely subpoena him. Victor's attorney responded 2 days later. Not with documents. With a motion to quash the subpoena. That alone told Denise we were headed in the right direction. Most people simply complied. Victor hired lawyers before answering a single question. The hearing was scheduled for the following Wednesday. In the meantime, Red River Equity finally produced the emails Elise had sent. There were 23 messages. The first few were harmless. Questions about valuation. General discussions about acquisitions. Then the tone changed. One email caught my attention immediately. From Elise Parker. Subject, timing. My attorney believes temporary orders will put enough financial pressure on him to consider selling. If that happens, how quickly could your client move? I read it 3 times. She hadn't been asking about a possible sale. She'd been discussing how to force one. Denise highlighted another message. This one wasn't from Elise. It was from Victor. Liquidity problems create opportunities. Most owners become emotional before they become practical. Another email. Once support obligations are established, maintaining payroll and legal costs simultaneously becomes difficult. Then, another. The goal isn't to win every issue. The goal is to reduce options. I sat back in my chair. They were planning this, Denise nodded. Long before she filed. The hearing on Victor's subpoena lasted less than an hour. His attorney argued that Victor had only offered general consulting advice. Denise introduced the emails. Then she introduced the draft purchase timeline. It outlined 6 steps. Create a valuation dispute. Increase temporary financial obligations. Restrict business liquidity. Encourage refinancing. Present acquisition offer. Close before final judgment. The judge read the document without speaking. Finally, he looked toward Victor's attorney. Your client describes a litigation strategy involving marital assets. It's hypothetical. It references these parties by name. Silence. The motion to quash was denied. Victor would be deposed. When we walked into the hallway afterward, Denise looked more satisfied than I'd seen her since this whole thing began. They just lost control of the timeline. That afternoon, something happened I never expected. My son Ethan called. He had stayed out of the divorce completely. Unlike Elisa's sister or Mallory, he hadn't picked sides. He'd simply stopped calling both of us. Dad? Hey, you busy? Not anymore. I need to tell you something. I could hear traffic behind him. I'm outside Mom's apartment. What happened? I found boxes. What kind of boxes? Files. I stayed quiet. I wasn't looking for anything. I know. I was helping her move some things. And? There are folders labeled with your company. That got my attention. What else? Employee records, insurance policies, equipment schedules. He hesitated. And another folder. What does it say? He took a breath. Buyout projections. I closed my eyes. Can you photograph everything? Already did. When can you send them? I'm pulling into your office. Ethan arrived 20 minutes later, carrying a cardboard archive box. I figured originals were better. He set it on my conference table. I didn't steal them, but they're mine. He nodded. I thought so. Inside were copies of nearly every major document connected to my business. Vendor contracts, equipment loans, client renewal schedules, cash flow summaries. Someone had been building a complete acquisition package. At the bottom sat a blue folder. Across the front, in Victor Sloan's handwriting, were 4 words. Project Evergreen, confidential inside, was a financial model. The plan assumed I would reject the first settlement, reject the second, eventually run low on cash after prolonged litigation. At month 11, Red River would offer to purchase my company. At a price almost 40% below market value, one handwritten note sat beside the projection. Owner is emotionally attached. Delay increases compliance. I laughed once. Ethan looked confused. What's funny? They never understood me. What do you mean? They thought I was attached to the company. I closed the folder. I'm attached to the people who work there. He looked around the office. You'd really sell it if you had to? If it protected my employees? Without hesitation. That answer surprised him. It surprised me too. Late that evening, Denise called again. I've got one more surprise. I've had enough surprises. I don't think you have. She sounded almost amused. We subpoenaed Victor's billing records. And? He wasn't hired by Elise. I frowned. Then who paid him? Someone else entirely. Who? She paused. The invoices were paid by a trust. What trust? The Mercer Family Investment Trust. I searched my memory. I didn't know anyone named Mercer. Then Denise added one sentence that changed everything. The trustee isn't related to Victor. Who is it? She took a slow breath. Gerald Knox. My wife's divorce attorney hadn't just represented her. According to the payment records, he had been financing the consultant, trying to engineer the sale of my business. And suddenly, this divorce wasn't just about a marriage ending. It was beginning to look like someone had turned the courtroom into a business opportunity. For the first time since Elise sent that 6-line email, I stopped thinking about the divorce. The marriage was over. That part had become obvious weeks ago. What mattered now was understanding how many people had turned my marriage into a business strategy. Denise spread the billing records across her conference table. Knox says he never controlled the trust, but he signed the payment approvals. She pointed to 3 different invoices: consulting services, acquisition planning, litigation analysis. Every one of them had Gerald Knox's electronic authorization. So, the lawyer hired the consultant. Not exactly. He approved payments. There's a difference. She leaned back. What I think happened is that Victor Sloan regularly worked with investors looking for distressed businesses, and Knox knew him. Very well. What about Red River? They've already admitted Victor introduced them. I stared at the paperwork. So, everybody knew each other. It certainly looks that way. There was a long silence. Finally, I asked the question that had been bothering me for days. Do you think Elise knew? Denise didn't answer immediately. I think she knew enough. What does that mean? I think she believed selling your company was inevitable. And I don't think she understood how many people were waiting to profit from it. That sounded exactly like something Elise would fall into. She was smart, capable. But once she believed someone understood money better than she did, she trusted them too quickly. Years earlier, that someone had been me. Now it was Victor. Victor Sloan's deposition took place the following Tuesday. I wasn't required to attend. I went anyway. He looked nothing like I expected. No expensive watch, no dramatic entrance, just a gray suit, polished shoes, and the kind of smile people practice in mirrors. Denise started simply. Mr. Sloan, how long have you worked with Red River Equity? About 6 years. How many acquisitions involving divorce proceedings have you consulted on? I don't recall. She handed him a spreadsheet. Would seeing your invoices help? He looked down. There appear to be 23. 23 in 6 years. Approximately. And in how many of those cases did you communicate directly with one spouse before litigation? His attorney objected. Denise rephrased. When did you first speak with Elise Parker? Victor adjusted his tie. Several months before she filed. What was discussed? General business valuation. Did you recommend litigation strategies? No. Denise slid one printed email toward him. It was the message I'd already seen. Liquidity problems create opportunities. Victor read it. That's taken out of context. Please provide the context. Silence. Another email. Delay increases compliance. Another. Owner is emotionally attached. Victor shifted in his chair. I was referring generally to negotiations? Denise nodded. So, when you wrote owner, you meant Mr. Parker? I didn't specify. You didn't need to. The deposition lasted nearly 5 hours. By the end of it, Victor had admitted he expected my company to be sold before the divorce finished. He just insisted he never pressured anyone. The real surprise came 2 days later. Red River's managing partner requested a meeting. Not through lawyers, personally. Denise almost declined. I asked her to hear him out. We met in a conference room at a downtown hotel. His name was Charles Benton, late 50s, soft-spoken. The kind of man who apologized before sitting down. I owe you one. I frowned. What do you mean? He slid a folder across the table. When Victor approached us, we believed this was a standard ownership transition. He looked genuinely uncomfortable. We had no idea forged financial documents were involved. Huh? Why should I believe you? You probably shouldn't. He nodded. So, I'll give you something instead. Inside the folder were internal emails. Victor had repeatedly assured Red River that I would become financially overwhelmed within a year. One message stood out. Attorney believes support obligations will eliminate owner's negotiating leverage by Q4. Charles sighed. The moment we learned about the fraudulent email account, we withdrew. Why didn't you tell anyone? We were advised there was no legal obligation. By who? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. We both knew. A week later, the judge scheduled a settlement conference. Elise arrived alone. No Mallory, No Victor. No confident smile. Just a legal pad and a cup of coffee she barely touched. During a break, she approached me in the hallway. Owen. I looked at her. I only need a minute. I nodded. She took a slow breath. I didn't know Knox knew Victor before this. I believe you. She looked surprised. You do? I also believe you stopped asking questions once the answers became inconvenient. Her eyes filled. I thought they were helping me. They were helping themselves, she nodded. I see that now. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, she quietly asked, When did you stop loving me? I looked down the empty hallway. I didn't. She frowned. What? I stopped trusting you. That's different. It is? She wiped at her eyes. I don't think I understood the difference. I know. She looked toward the conference room. I've agreed to withdraw the business claim. I heard. I'm also withdrawing the request for attorney's fees. I nodded once. Thank you. She almost smiled. I don't think I've earned gratitude. No, I answered honestly. But it's still the right decision. She hesitated. I wish I'd talked to you before any of this. So do I. Then the bailiff opened the conference room door, and our conversation ended. Not with forgiveness, not with anger, just with two people finally speaking honestly after months of lawyers speaking for them. As I walked back inside, Denise leaned toward me and whispered, That sounded different. It was. What changed? I looked across the room at Elise. For the first time, she stopped trying to win. The final settlement conference lasted less than 2 hours. After months of motions, depositions, forensic reports, and arguments, it ended with something surprisingly ordinary. Paperwork, no dramatic speeches, no shouting, just signatures. Elise formally withdrew every claim to ownership of the company. She acknowledged she had never held an ownership interest in the business itself. In return, I agreed to a straightforward division of our marital assets based on documented values instead of the fantasy numbers Mallory's valuation company had invented. The house would be sold. The equity would be divided according to the court's calculations. Each of us would keep our retirement accounts after the fraudulent transfers were corrected. Neither side would pay the other's attorney's fees. It wasn't a victory. It was an ending. And after everything that had happened, an ending was enough. 3 weeks later, I met with my employees before opening the shop. Nobody knew every detail of the divorce. I had intentionally kept my personal life away from work. But rumors travel fast in a town the size of Tulsa. The technicians gathered around the break room with coffee in their hands. Tessa stood near the whiteboard, holding the day's schedule. I owe all of you an explanation, I said. The room became quiet. You've probably heard pieces of what's been going on. Nobody interrupted. There were attempts to obtain company records. There were legal disputes. There were discussions about selling the business. One of the apprentices frowned. Are we getting bought out? No. The answer came faster than I expected. No. I looked around the room. This company isn't for sale. Relief spread across several faces. I built this place to create something stable. I'm not handing it to people who only see numbers on a spreadsheet. Tessa smiled. I figured. You figured right. The meeting lasted less than 10 minutes. Afterward, everyone simply went back to work. Compressors still failed. Restaurants still needed repairs. Customers still called before sunrise. Life had quietly continued while I was busy thinking it had stopped. A month after the divorce became final, Detective Laura Jensen asked if I'd stop by her office. She handled financial fraud cases connected to the district attorney's office. I wanted to let you know the investigation is finished. Into Victor? She nodded. And Knox? What happened? Neither was charged criminally. I wasn't surprised. What about professionally? That's different. She slid a newspaper across the desk. The state bar had opened disciplinary proceedings against Gerald Knox for undisclosed conflicts of interest and improper financial relationships with outside consultants. Victor Sloan had lost several commercial contracts after clients learned how he structured acquisition plans around ongoing litigation. Neither outcome put either man in prison. Sometimes consequences arrive, wearing a suit instead of handcuffs. Laura closed the file. You probably expected something bigger. I used to. And now? I'd rather have my life back, she smiled. Most people eventually say that. The house sold in early spring. I walked through every room one last time before closing. The kitchen where Elise and I had celebrated promotions. The living room where we watched football every Sunday. The spare bedroom that became my office during the pandemic. Memories didn't disappear because a marriage failed. They simply stopped belonging to the future. The buyers were a young couple expecting their first child. They asked whether the neighborhood was quiet. It is. Good schools? Very. The husband smiled. We're excited. So were we. I meant it. As I handed over the keys, I realized something strange. I wasn't grieving the house. I was grateful I no longer had to fight over it. About 6 months later, Ethan invited me to dinner. Just the two of us. No holidays, no birthdays. No reason except that he wanted to. Halfway through the meal, he put his fork down. I've been thinking about something. Okay. When Mom left, I stayed out of it. You did. I thought that made me neutral. I nodded. It didn't. He looked embarrassed. I understand that now. I took a sip of coffee. Neutral isn't always neutral. No. He looked at me. Sometimes it's just letting someone else carry everything. That was probably the most honest thing anyone in my family had said in a long time. I'm sorry. I know. I should have checked on you. You should have. He nodded. I will next time. I smiled. I hope there isn't next time. He laughed. So do I. I heard from Elise one final time almost a year after the divorce. She sent an email. Not through lawyers. Not asking for money. Not asking for another chance. Just an email. She wrote that she had started working full-time for a nonprofit. That she had sold the Lexus. That she was renting a small apartment. She apologized for trusting people who convinced her every disagreement in a marriage was proof of manipulation. She apologized for believing strangers understood our relationship better than the two people living inside it. At the very end, she wrote, You once told me that trust is built slowly and lost quickly. I didn't understand what you meant until I lost yours. I read the message once. Then I replied with 2 sentences. I hope you find peace. Take care of yourself. That was enough. Some conversations don't need another chapter. Grant and I still meet every other Saturday for breakfast. One morning, he looked across the table and grinned. You know what I noticed? What? You don't check your phone every 30 seconds anymore. I laughed. I hadn't noticed. You used to. He stirred his coffee. Always waiting for the next problem. I looked out the diner window. He was right. For years, my phone had been an alarm system. Employees, customers, bills, family emergencies, arguments. Someone always needed something now. Sometimes it stayed silent for hours. And I had finally learned not to mistake silence for loneliness. Sometimes silence is simply peace. People occasionally ask whether I regret keeping such detailed records throughout my marriage, whether I regret separating business accounts, whether I regret questioning unusual transfers. My answer is always the same: no. Not because I expected my marriage to fail, because trust and accountability were never supposed to compete with each other. Healthy relationships survive transparency. Only dishonest ones are threatened by it. Looking back, the 6-line email that arrived at 9:12 on a Monday morning felt like the end of my life. It wasn't. It was the end of believing that love required me to ignore warning signs, avoid difficult questions, or apologize for protecting what I had spent decades building. I didn't save my marriage. I couldn't. Both people have to want that. But I did save my business. I protected the people who depended on it. And somewhere between court hearings, forensic reports, and stacks of legal documents, I found something I hadn't realized I'd been missing for years. The ability to make decisions without asking permission to protect my own future. That turned out to be worth far more than any settlement ever could have been.